Hello, readers, and welcome back to Quarantine Literacy. Today we are commemorating a very important holiday called Juneteenth. We're going to read about three incredibly influential and important African American women. Juneteenth is not a very well-known holiday, which is really unfortunate and very strange because it's an incredibly important moment in history. So most of you have heard of the Emancipation Proclamation, and most of you have probably learned about Abraham Lincoln. And you've probably read somewhere that the Emancipation Proclamation was officially put into place on January 1st, 1863. And that's probably the date where you learned that enslaved folks in America were freed. However, the information took a long time to move across the entire United States. And a lot of white people didn't want that information to be disseminated across the states because they wanted to keep people enslaved. They wanted to keep African and Black people enslaved. So it wasn't until June 19th, 1865, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, 2.5 years, that the last of the enslaved people in Texas were freed. So it is an incredibly important and special occasion to celebrate. It's also known as Liberation Day, when we celebrate the fact that we as a country finally came to our senses, finally understood that humans should not be kept as property, and that all enslaved Black people were freed. So today we're going to read about three magnificent, important, and influential Black women, one of whom was alive during slavery. And the other woman was alive during the Civil Rights Movement, which we've talked about. And the last woman is still alive today, and she is an influential person right now. So I'll tell you all about them in just a moment as we read their stories in Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. So this is Harriet Tubman. She was a freedom fighter. One day, a girl was standing in front of a grocery store when a Black man came running past. He was being chased by a white man who yelled, "Stop that man! He's my slave!" She did nothing to stop him. The girl's name was Harriet. She was 12 years old, and she was also enslaved. Harriet hoped the man would escape. She wanted to help him. So again, this is a time when people were enslaved. They were kept as property by white people. And I don't just mean people. Black people who were brought over from the continent of Africa, all over the continent of Africa. So African people were brought to the United States and enslaved by white people. Just then, the overseer hurled an iron object at the running man. He missed, but it hit Harriet on the head. Oh my gosh, how awful. She was badly injured, but her thick hair cushioned the blow enough to save her life. Wow, her hair saved her life. My hair had never been combed, she said, and it stood out like a bushel basket. A few years later, the family who owned her put her up for sale, so Harriet decided to escape. Now again, that this language is it's so foreign, it's so confusing because they're saying that people put another person up for sale. And I know that just like boggles the mind, kids. Like that doesn't make any sense. But that was the backward thinking back then, that white people thought that they could own Black people. She hid in the daytime and traveled by night. When she crossed the border into Pennsylvania, she realized for the first time in her life she was free. I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person now that I was free. There was such glory over everything, and I felt like I was in heaven. She thought about the runaway slave and her family in Maryland who were still enslaved. She knew she had to help them. Over the next 11 years, she went back 19 times and rescued hundreds of enslaved people. She was never captured, and she never lost a single person. Wow. This is an incredibly brave woman. She said, "And I prayed to God to make me strong and able to fight, and that's what I've always prayed for ever since." Harriet Tubman. The next important figure we're going to talk about is someone named Maya Angelou, and she is an incredible writer. I've read most, if not all, of her books, and she's a poet as well. And she was was instrumental during the civil rights movement. She sort of became the voice of a lot of African American folks at that time. And she really articulated why equal rights was important, both for, Black, white, women, men. So she is an incredibly important figure in American history in general, but specifically for the civil rights movement. And I thought that she would be a wonderful person to read about for Juneteenth. So Maya Angelou, she was a writer. Once there was a little girl who didn't speak for 5 years. She thought her words could hurt people and promised herself to never make a peep again. Her name was Maya. People thought Maya was crazy, but in fact, she was simply scared. I know you will speak again one day, her grandmother kept telling her. You will find your voice, her beloved brother said. Maya listened to them and began to memorize everything she heard or read, poems, songs, short tales, random conversations. It was like putting a CD on. If I wanted to, I'd run through my memory and think, that's the one I want to hear, she later recalled. She became so good at memorizing words that when she started to write, it was like music was flowing from her pen. She wrote about her childhood, growing up in a town where African Americans were treated badly for the color of their skin. Her writing became the voice of the civil rights movement and all the people fighting for the rights of African Americans. She constantly reminded us that everyone, Black or white, male or female, has equal rights. In addition to her many books, Maya was so talented that she also wrote songs, plays, and movies, and acted on stage and on screen. See me now, Black, female, American, and Southern, she once said to a group of Black students. See me now and see yourselves. What can't you do? I love that. Her quote here says, my mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. I love that. So that's Maya Angelou. The last figure we're going to read about is Michelle Obama, another strong, important Black woman. So Michelle Obama was the first African American first lady in the United States. And the first lady is the person who is married to the president, right? So her husband was Barack Obama, the first African American president in the United States. This is Michelle Obama. She was a lawyer and she's the first lady. Once upon a time, there was a girl who was always afraid. Her name was Michelle Robinson, and she lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Chicago with her family. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I'm not good enough, she worried. And her mother would say, if it can be done, you can do it. Anything is possible, said her dad. Michelle worked hard. Sometimes teachers told her she should not aim too high because her grades were not that good. Some people said she would never achieve something big because she was just a Black girl from the south side of Chicago. But Michelle chose to listen to her parents. Anything is possible, she thought. So she graduated from Harvard and became a lawyer at a big firm. One day, her boss asked her to mentor a young lawyer. His name was Barack Hussein Obama. They fell in love and got married a few years later. One day, Barack told her he wanted to become president of the United States. At first, she thought he was crazy. But then she remembered, if it can be done, you can do it. So she quit her job and helped him on his campaign. That was really selfless of her. Barack won the elections twice, and Michelle became the first African American First Lady of the United States. No one is born smart. You become smart through hard work, is her motto. And her quote here says, always stay true to yourself and never let what somebody else says distract you from your goals. And that's Michelle Obama. So happy Juneteenth to everyone. What an important date and what an important moment in history for us to acknowledge and to reflect upon. And what a great time for us to think about what we can still be doing to ensure that everyone has equal rights and equal access to everything in this country. And I know you kiddos are going to work so hard to make sure that that is true and that that gets even more true as you get older. Until next time, my friends, please celebrate Juneteenth and come back for one more book before we start summer vacation. Until then, bye.